Markets change. The unknown unknowns are what move markets, while the known unknowns are already priced in. Declines happen, but history shows they've all been temporary. The advance is what's permanent. I'm Mike Bishop.
And I'm Michael Bishop.
As fiduciaries, with decades of combined experience, we've helped investors navigate the noise with a disciplined, long-term plan. The key to success is acting on a strategy, not reacting to headlines. Welcome to the Fiduciary's Edge, where we break down the risks, opportunities, and realities of managing wealth the right way. Let's dive in.
When someone starts searching for an investment partner, they don't come in with a blank slate. They understandably bring a lifetime of experiences, assumptions, and questions shaped by those beliefs. In today's episode, we're unpacking some of the most common mindsets we hear from investors at this stage and offer what we believe are better, more useful ways to frame those questions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Fiduciary's Edge. Today's episode is called the Retirement Reality Check, and we are going over some beliefs we hear about clients, questions they have when they're looking for an investment advisor, and some of our opinions to that.
Michael, thank you. As you just kind of mentioned, people come into this decision of, I want to partner with a financial advisor to get me into retirement or to help me prepare for it and then live it successfully. And we're going to get in a lot of the things that we've learned along the way. But I think as a starting point, big zoom out, there's generally two types of ways that I think you could divide financial advisors into two camps in the way they're regulated. One being, which we're very familiar with, the fiduciary standard.
Right.
And another being a suitability standard. Very different, and probably most people have no idea what that means. And with your law background, you actually studied this in law school, and I've been living this for a long time, but could you kind of summarize why is that important, and why should someone think about that going into this decision?
Yeah. Great way to start it out. So generally at a high level, like you said, there's fiduciaries, and then there are advisors who are only regulated by a suitability standard. And a good way to tease out the differences between the two is, let's say that like a registered dietitian, I'll pick on my sister here, someone who's studying to become an RD. A registered dietitian is a fiduciary. But more to the point, what is a dietitian able to do for you? A dietitian's able to look at your medical history. They're able to take into consideration what medications you're on, any surgeries you have had or are planning on having, your age, gender, any sort of food allergies that you have, and they come up with a meal plan that is specifically tailored to meet your nutritional and maybe even your training goals. That is above and beyond that registered dietitian's tastes and preferences. That RD might really like pizza, but maybe pizza is not in your dietary plan if you were trying to meet certain goals. So they will recommend that you do not have pizza above their own, tastes and preferences so that your goals are met. And that's really what a fiduciary investment advisor is. And just to be clear on this, that's what we are at Bishop & Company. Throw some terms at you too. We are an RIA, which is a registered investment advisory firm. Within that firm, there are the two of us, IARs, investment advisor representatives. And under that regulatory scheme, we serve as fiduciary investment advisors to our clients. And so the practical effect of that for us is we have to make recommendations for clients that very directly and specifically meet their individual goals above and beyond, or irrespective of what our own opinions and preferences and our goals are. We have to be there 110% in the best interest of the client. And as you said, that is different than an advisor who is just governed under a suitability standard. Someone who may be just under a suitability standard, these might be individuals like just stock brokers most commonly, maybe individuals who are selling certain types of insurance products or, other types of investment vehicles like annuities or certain mutual funds. But generally what someone who is just looking out for your investments to be suitable for you is, to go back to the registered dietitian example, it'd be like someone at McDonald's picking out a meal for you. Like, it's not bad. A meal at McDonald's is going to nourish you for 1,500 calories probably per meal. But that's not going to help you meet any sort of health goal. That's not tailored to you or your body and your diet individually. That's a fast food meal that suitably, it's food. It's a meal that will nourish you for that moment. But that's not going to get you to where you're going. That's not going to help you pursue your goals. And so that's the main difference between a fiduciary advisor, someone looking out for you in your best interest, versus someone who is just looking out to sell you something that is suitable for your goals, not necessarily a perfect match.
Completely different set of regulations.
Yeah, that's right.
Best interests versus good enough.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I do think that if there's any big takeaway from this episode, not to give away the lead right at the top, but this is maybe question 0. I would encourage people who are looking for a financial advisor or, something to maybe ask your own is, are you a fiduciary? And if they are, they tell you that. And if they're not, watch them walk around that and try to explain it to you. But that's really, I think, the most fundamental thing, that if you're looking for an investment partner, as we said at the top of the episode, you need someone that's looking out for you 110% of the time, not looking out for themselves in that way.
Yep.
And so, the next part of this is, it'd be fun to turn this into a little bit of a lightning round of, questions or beliefs that we get in client meetings, or maybe especially in prospect meetings, new people coming on or thinking about coming on. And some of the beliefs that we hear, questions that clients think they should be asking a financial advisor. And our reaction as kind of people on the other side of that question, what we think of it, and maybe a better question to pose to a financial advisor instead. So I'd love to get your opinion on these. And the first one I got here is one we hear often: as I get older, my portfolio should become more conservative. Mm-hmm. What is your response to that?
I think we've all been taught that subconsciously around the breakfast table, even hearing our parents ever talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
I even believed that at one point early in my career. And the premise is that stocks are risky, bonds are safe. And as I get older, I have less time to absorb the downturns.
Yep.
So I want to put more and more in bonds and less in equities to preserve my money, which sounds intuitively, that sounds pretty logical. That I think we spent a lot of time talking to people about this over the years. Of the problem with that premise, it is that it ignores the monster of inflation.
Yeah. Yep.
And most people don't think of that. Like, if you consider that the average couple in this country retires in their early 60s. And
Yep.
if you do a joint life expectancy, meaning the second to die of an early 60-year-old non-smoking couple, most people will be pretty surprised at this, but one of those two is likely to live 3 decades.
Beyond 60.
Yes.
Wow.
So you're looking at 30 years.
Yep.
in a retirement mode.
Yep.
And I just think of my own personal experience. If I go back 30, a little bit over 30 years since your mother and I got married, and I think about, in the early 90s when we were starting out, I bought a new Honda Accord, and I remember seeing the sticker on that car was $14,000, and that may as well have been $140,000. Today, that same equivalent Honda Accord sells for $40,000.
Yeah, wow.
The apartment that we rented in Pittsburgh, I remember we paid $500 a month for. And I literally looked up that same apartment in Green Tree, right outside of the city, and it's the same one today is leasing for $1,200 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I think our healthcare premium was like $200 a month, and it's close to $2,000 a month. I mean, I just keep going on with that. That's everyone's experience. So if you think about historic trend line inflation, like the rate of average CPI year after year, going back decade after decade, it averages about 3% a year.
Yeah.
So if I know that is the rearview mirror historical average, and I go forward with that, and you just do the math on it, $1 on day one in retirement is going to lose at 3% inflation half of its purchasing power in about 24 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So if I go into retirement fixing my income, putting more and more into things that the income is fixed in a multi-decade environment where I know the prices are going to go up. Historically, it's been 3%. We don't know what it'll be. But if we use that, in like year 24 of my retirement, I'm going to need $2 for every one I started with. And otherwise, I mean, this sounds kind of harsh, but people that do that, and again, the mindset, the conventional wisdom is that's what you do.
Yep.
It just builds in, we talk about it as it's financial suicide.
Yep.
Like you're going to burn through your portfolio and run out of principal. So that's a major myth that we
Yep.
try to reprogram that thinking of.
I even built into that myth too is the longevity assumption that you're talking about too. I want to focus on that for a second, I think, because I think every American you could go up on the street and ask is probably familiar that like men in this country generally live to like 74 or 75 or something, and women live to like the average life expectancy is like 78 or 76 or something like
correct.
that. That is assuming from birth, like the average person is going to live in your cohort is going to live to 76. What we're getting at is if you are someone who made it to 60, that doesn't mean you only have 10 years left. I mean, that average of age 70 is the actuaries looking at the entire pool of people that are born and what's the average age. You know, an average is inclusive of those more than and less than the average. So, you know, and we all know tragic stories, like you lose friends and classmates along the way, younger than 70. But what the actuaries are saying is that if you make it to age 60 and you're married and both of you don't smoke, at least one of you then is likely to make it to 90.
Right. It's like the bend shoots up. It's like a big exponential increase.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you've missed a lot of those like young in life accidents, diseases, whatever, and you've gotten now to this advanced, you're likely to keep going.
Yeah.
So if, you know, we do hear clients facetiously make the joke that's like, oh, I'm 65, my dad had a massive heart attack when he was 60, I'm not going to make it much longer than 10. It's like, actually, in all likelihood, you're likely to keep going by another 3 decades.
Right. So you have to plan for that. I mean, if you don't do that, how horrible would it be to find out when you're in your 80s and you run out of money of, wow, really should have thought through this.
Right. Yeah. Because you can't go back and get a job when you're like 89. So second one we get a lot. And this, we do hear this often. I would say we heard this most recently on or about Liberation Day. And this question is, I should sell out of falling markets and reinvest once the market stops falling, i.e., I want out and I want back in when it's good. Response, counselor?
Wow, that is so intuitive to most people's thinking of what an advisor should be doing for them.
Yep.
And I think the most memorable morning of my career of doing this happened 24 years ago on the morning of September 11th. I mean, everyone remembers where they were that morning, and
Sure.
vividly, this is a work related event. I remember, so I was working for another company at the time, and we were acquired by a bigger firm, and one of the board of directors on the acquiring company decided to move his personal assets to our investment division to manage it. He was with another investment advisor who he had fired 6 months prior because the market was in a downturn. This was early 2001. He fired them. Market was already going down from the tech bubble.
Oh, yeah.
And he was sitting in cash. But I remember on that Tuesday morning, September 11th, I had a meeting with him and his wife, and they were coming in to finalize our implementation.
Yeah.
And we had met with them. We built a perfect, a really good plan, a diversified portfolio. They were all in agreement. We were going to go forward with it. And as I'm getting ready that Tuesday morning, I remember the phone rang at the office, and Maureen called and said, "Did you see that an airplane hit the World Trade Center?" And I'm getting charts ready and the application. I'm like, "Wait, what? Really?
Wow.
Was it like a commuter plane, like a pilot fell asleep or something?" She goes, I don't think so." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." Okay. So I'm running around getting everything together. And then she calls back like half hour later or whatever and says, "Another plane hit the second tower." I was kind of like taken back by it. I'm like, "Really?" And then our receptionist came in and said, "Your clients are here." And I said, I got to go. So I met them at the elevator. And as I'm walking them into the conference room, down the hall, we had a kitchenette at the office. And I saw everyone in our company, there was 15 people, are jammed in the kitchen watching the television.
No way. Wow.
And I'm just kind of terrified of what's going on. So I pull the door shut and we sit down. And I remember the older couple, and he sits down and he says, "We've been out of the market now for months because this market's declining, and it was a horrible performance. So I wanted to stop that. Now with whatever's going on today, I think we should just sit in cash. We should just ride this out. This is going to take months to straight. I don't even know what's happening, but I just want to hold it there. What do you think we should do?" And it was like a subconscious response. I don't even think I thought about it. I just went into this question and I said, "Mr. and Mrs. Smith, have you ever heard of a guy named Art Cashin?" And they shook their head, "No." And I said, he's one of the oldest traders on the New York Stock Exchange. He's head of UBS's floor operations. He's on CNBC every morning. They interview him for what the market's going to do. But he's got all these great stories. And they're kind of looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, he has this great story. When he was 18, he started as a runner for traders on the New York Stock Exchange. This was in the early 60s. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he said there was this older gentleman that kind of adopted him as his mentor, and he called him Professor Jack because he just had so much wisdom. And one day, right before the market closed, there was a rumor that Russia had launched rockets during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Dow Jones took a dive, and he tried to put through a put order to like ride the market down, and he couldn't get it to work. So the market closes, and Professor Jack, every day as the market closed, he'd run a block away. There was a bar down there, and he'd sit there and drink Manhattans until dinner time. So this Art Cashin goes down to the bar, Professor Jack sitting there, and he says, Jack, there's a rumor that the Russians have launched missiles. I tried to put a sell order in it. I couldn't get it to work. What do we do?" And he said, "Kid, sit down and buy me a drink." and he does, and Jack takes the shot down, and he says, "When you hear that there are missiles in the air, you buy, you don't sell." And Art Cashin's like, "You buy?" And Professor Jack says, "Yes, you buy, because if you're wrong, the trade will never clear and we'll all be dead." So I get the story out, and this Mr. and Mrs. Smith are just sitting there, and all of a sudden I realized, oh boy, how are they going to respond to this? And it felt like 3 minutes went by, and he just looks at me and says, okay, do what you think we need to do.
Wow.
So I went, the cash transferred in. It was a couple $1 million 24 years ago. That was a big account. And as the cash came in, we put it to work. The market was closed for 4 days. It didn't open until the following Monday. But now, when I look back at that, the S&P then was just over 1,000. Today, as we're sitting here recording this, we're at 6,600.
Yeah.
From that moment in time, the S&P's made like 300 new all-time highs.
Wow.
And I think bonds from that point in time are up like 160%. The S&P's up 6 times what it was back then. So the point of that is, when people say that, there's always trouble coming over the hill. Always something to worry about. That's not a reason not to implement the plan.
Yep. I mean, like we said in our first episode too, like if you see light underneath the rocket, you've missed getting on the rocket. Like, it's already moving without you. Like, you cannot time the market. And we've addressed this disbelief before too, but that's another really salient story, that in the face of uncertain risk, you're still better to be fully deployed in the market than sitting on the sidelines and missing a potential takeoff. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, this is another good one. We got this one recently. This one, the way this story goes is, my financial advisor's performance track record is how I should qualify them. How do you like that?
Wow, you're right. We talked to a prospect recently, and that was what they literally had this question written down on their notebook and asked that of us, as if that is predictive of what their experience is going to be. And I think I learned really early on that outperformance can never be a goal.
Yeah.
Because it's not consistently achievable, even by, I'm going to say, the greatest investor. You hear me talk about him all the time, Warren Buffett, has had incredible results. Like in the top 1% of all investors of all time, he couldn't even guarantee that.
Yep.
It's a unachievable objective, which people think, if I hire an advisor, it's like a hired gun. They're going to get the best performance than if I didn't have them involved with me.
Yep.
I think probably the best example of that is Vanguard. I've seen study after study of proving that that's not an actual thing, is that outperformance doesn't persist and it's not predictive. Vanguard most recently, I think, did the best job of doing this. They looked at all the mutual funds you can pick from out there, all the actively managed mutual funds, which are smartest people on the planet working on Wall Street with great information. And they rank them. There are thousands of them, and they rank them in quintiles. So they put 5 buckets up, top performer to bottom. And then I thought this 30 years ago, if I look in the rearview mirror at which horses finished the race first, that's a pretty good indicator that in the next period of time, those horses should finish the race first again, or at least be near the top, maybe not be the first one across the line. And what Vanguard found is, if you do that, look at the top half of performers and then think that they're going to be in the top half in the next period of time, they're actually more likely to be in the bottom quintile, or as Vanguard calls them, dead. Like they shut the fund down, liquidated it. It was so bad.
Yep. So
the probabilities that they fall to the bottom are better than that they stay in the top half. So it's a fallacy. And we don't, when we look at investments, of course we want to know how they perform in different environments, but I think you could contest to this. We don't use that as predictive or prescriptive of, boy, it outperformed these different managers or this index in this period of time. Therefore, we think that that's correlated to that in the future.
I mean, yeah, we put that at the bottom of every one of our emails. Past performance is no guarantee of future success. So I don't know how many other ways to say it. I think
That's why it's there.
That's just why it's there.
And we're regulated to do that.
Right, yeah. But it's true. I mean, that's not a hedge. Vanguard demonstrated that to be true. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. That's just not how this works. I mean, facetiously, I think a better question, I mean, if the question presented is, what is your performance track record? What's your alpha is another way of saying that. Honestly, a better question to ask of a potential advisor is like, what's your internet package? Like, how much speed, like what kind of download speeds do you get? Like what access to information do you get like as quickly as possible? Like that truly is more controlling and determinative of a good advisor, like how plugged in they are and in the know they are about just what's going on and research tools than like, what did you do for me yesterday? It's just, and that sounds a little asinine to even say, but I do think that's true.
How do you make decisions? What information do you use to make those decisions?
Right. Yeah. What's your ping? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Next one here. This is a fun one, but we do get this a lot, and we get this from everyone, clients and prospects alike. Is what do you think the market will do?
Yeah. Wow. Isn't that the most common thing on people's minds? What they think an advisor should have an opinion and a crystal ball of what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about this, but to know how many people are going to convert from their iPhone 15 into the new 17, or how many people might jump to a Samsung, or how many people are going to go to Disney parks this year or see the next new movie that they're releasing, or change in preferences to go from Target to some other store. On the scale of 300 million people or so in the United States and how all those dollars are going to be spent, there's no one that can come up with that exponential impact of what's going to happen in the economy. Right. I think it's absolutely unknowable. And the poster child, which I think of this all the time, I'm going to give you another real quick example. This is December 1996. And I remember the firm that I worked for at the time, we would get multiple Wall Street Journals, paper copies of the Wall Street Journal delivered every morning. I get into my office. There's a Wall Street Journal on my desk with a big blue Sharpie circling the headline that morning. And it said staff meeting in 10 minutes.
Oof.
And the headline was Greenspan, this is Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan at the time, calls for market top. And I sat there and I read it. And the prior night, Alan Greenspan was the speaker at a big dinner, and all the Federal Reserve members were there, and there were a bunch of people on Wall Street. And he made what is now dubbed as the irrational exuberance speech. And specifically what he said was, irrational exuberance has unduly escalated asset values, which then become subject to unexpected and prolonged contractions. So that's how he talked in that kind of
hyper technical all the time.
And the street, Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal, everyone investing interpreted that as, we have hit a top and Alan Greenspan is ringing the bell that it is over. Yeah. And literally, we met as a company and we were thinking, if Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, with leagues of PhDs working for him, the best research available, saying, we have hit a top, we're going into a prolonged downturn, maybe we should be getting out of equities. And then we debated it and decided, let's not, and kind of trust the process. So from the date of that speech, again, December 1996, smartest guy on the planet back then, best information, called a top, 97, 98, 99, the next 3 calendar years, if you lump those together, from that point, the market went up an additional over 100%.
Yeah.
So
bad call, Greenspan.
Really bad call. And then it did, like it always does. It hit some temporary downturn. That was a pretty horrific decline, and then it recovered again from that. That to me is the epitome of why outlooks are nonsense.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, this is not just some guy making a gut call. This is the most educated guy on the subject, putting his reputation out there, making that call, and everyone listened, and it did the antithesis of what he said it would.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one thing to be obviously knowledgeable about current events and what's going on in the market, and up to date on whatever regulations apply, but a holistic forecast of the American economy is not possible and not really productive. I mean, it's fun, and it's one thing, like when we're in client meetings or out with some buddies, to like pontificate about the state of the market, but it's not something that that we rest our own
Right.
investment decisions on as our exclusive opinion about what the market's doing. Or if we don't even do that, but if we did, that would not be something you could reliably use.
Yes.
Last but definitely not least is a real doozy here. This one is, we hear this every 4 years from a different side of the coin, because it's always upsetting one side only.
Oh,
and that question,
I know what this is.
And that question is, the political party in power will determine how the market performs. And I do want to say that is agnostic of registration. We hear that from both Democrats and Republicans,
Absolutely.
depending on who's in the White House. So what is your response to that?
Well, most people adamantly believe there is an Oz behind the curtain that controls the market. And I try to tell them, I think the value of the U.S. equity market, the latest I saw was in June of this year, is something like $62 trillion. Wow. There is no one person rigging that. That is not possible to do. Funniest story, which brings this to light, this is one of my favorite Warren Buffett stories ever, is 1951, I think he said it was, he proposed to his wife, and his then-to-be father-in-law at that proposal called him over and said, "Warren, I want you to come over. I want to talk with you." So he goes over to his fiance's house. His soon-to-be father-in-law says, "Let's go into the living room. We need to talk about some things." So he goes in there, shuts the door, and he said, "Warren, I wanted to let you know that you're going to fail. You're going to fail miserably." And the reason you're going to fail, it's not because of you personally, but it's because the Democrats are in the White House and they're communists. They're going to destroy the U.S. economy.
Yeah, Harry S. Truman, famous communist. Yeah.
And Warren Buffett said this went on for like 3 hours, and he just kind of ad nauseum just laughed through it. Kind of related to, obviously did not happen. Probably the best statistical evidence that this is not true, Invesco Mutual Funds puts out this study every election period. They just did one that ran from 1896 through the end of 2024, so the end of the last calendar year. And they basically, this is fabulous. They show in 1896, if someone had $10,000, they just put a number on it to say a starting point, invested in the Dow Jones, and only invested during Republican administrations.
So cashed out during Democratic administration.
Yes, thank you. So when there was a Democrat in the White House, sitting in cash. When there was a Republican, invested in the Dow.
Okay.
$10,000, 1896. It grew to $400,000 end of last year. Same thing on the Democratic side. If a Democrat was in the White House, I was invested. Republican, I was out.
Yep.
Grew to about $800,000 actually. And then this is the most startling. They said, just be agnostic to who's in office and trust the process.
Yep.
Leave it in no matter what. Let the compounding work.
The whole time.
The whole time. In almost the number is going to sound incorrect because it's not even in the same universe. 11 million.
Yeah, man.
Like it doesn't even compute how you could get from 4 to 800,000 to 11 million.
Yep.
And I think to me it shows over, a long planning cycle why that's just noise. Like
Yep.
no president controls the market.
Yep. Yep. Again, I don't want to keep making the same point over and over again, but if you're timing the market and you're looking for when the rocket takes off to get on it, by the time it's moving, you've missed the ship. You've got to stay in the entire time. Yeah, and that's a good summary of what clients come to us with. And maybe if we could flip it on its head now and sort of offer the more positive questions to ask, or just other things to think about in your own financial planning, or if you're looking for an advisor, things to think about and things to ask them. So a good way to look at this, a financial advisor, is someone who's making a long-term plan with you. That means obviously they're going to be with you for a long time. And so you should choose someone who is going to be competent to fly the plane with you for your entire career, because usually you engage one financial advisor over the course of your career. And I think specifically that pilot, that financial advisor, should be someone who is really competent at what they do as being a financial advisor, should also have a general knowledge, a workable knowledge of other things that are going to affect your financial plan, like tax implications that you are up against, estate planning, things that other people may have done to benefit you or that you are setting up yourself. If you are a business executive or owner, how your compensation or ownership affects your overall income and eventual retirement. All those things come into play. But your financial advisor should not also be your only tax advisor, your only legal advisor, your only banking advisor. I mean, your only real estate advisor, if that's, the business that you're in or something like that. Your financial advisor should be one of many individuals who are very competent in their own fields that holistically make up your bench.
Yep.
And I picked on like a tax advisor and a legal advisor specifically. Like we said at the top, you should pick a fiduciary investment advisor. And not all investment advisors are fiduciaries, so make sure you're picking one that is. But your attorney and your accountant are also fiduciaries. They're regulated differently, but they're fiduciaries too. So you want to surround yourself with a team of fiduciaries that have expertise in their own fields that can get you to your goals. That's, I think, something really fundamental too.
Well, to add to that point, even in my personal life, I mean, when I think about our family doctor, we think the world of her. But if there's a problem, like I had a problem with my knee, and she knew very much about it, knew much more than I did, much more than my Google searches did, but recommended me to see, an orthopedic surgeon on it.
Yeah.
And then he went into much more depth because he was the one flying the plane all the time on that issue. Like to your point, you want someone with a lot of depth that's constantly in the cockpit, flying through all the storms. That's what they do.
Yep.
And we know, I'll pick on us as an example. We know a lot about tax. We deal with it all the time. We know about gains. We know about income. We know how things are handled regarding required distributions.
Mm-hmm.
But when we have complicated situations, we'll pull in a CPA to help the team, us, the client, and get the right objective accomplished. So one person can't be a jack of all trades.
Yep.
And especially if you want highly competent. And I heard this a while ago that in anyone's career, anyone's life, your circle of competence, as you get further and further, and it narrows.
Yep.
But it gets substantially deeper. Like you can't know a lot about everything and be an expert on it, especially in today's world. It's getting more and more specialized.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just beat this to death. I mean, in the example, I'll use myself as an example where I am an attorney by trade. I have an active bar license. I'm studying for my CFP now. The CFP gives me specific exposure to areas like insurance planning, retirement planning, income planning, tax planning. I did a fair amount of that in another life as an attorney, but to the clients listening, I'm not doing your taxes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to help you pick an insurance policy or plan that's going to work for you. I'm going to pull in other people who know more about those fields than I do to really give you an answer home. I know enough to be dangerous in those fields, and that's the point I think I'm driving home, is you should have someone that you trust, very competent in their own lane, but knows enough to kind of sniff out incompetence maybe in other lanes, or just knows enough when they're creeping into other lanes that they should maybe not.
To that point, so you're in the CFP program, and when I was coming up through this, I chose a different path through the Chartered Financial Analyst, the CFA program. So I think those two are going to complement each other. But that is not an endorsement of the right person. But I think one of those sets kind of a certification of competency. I know that this person has gotten to a certain skill level. And I mean, I remember when I got that charter, that was 30 years ago, by the way. Wow. I was like, oh, I'm going to start getting a million calls from Wall Street. And I think, I don't want to say that's when the real learning began, but that was when the real implementation, holding clients' hands in market crashes and seeing how diversification worked and single stock exposure didn't, and all bonds and no equities created pain for people later in life. Like seeing it implemented in real life, way more important than the textbook material. But I think you want to have, to work with someone that you know that there is some training, some competency, and CFP or CFA we think are the gold standards to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the last two things that we could say on this topic that are good things to think about, things to ask your advisor, things to consider when you're looking for advisors are, what is their approach to investment management? And literally what I mean by that is, how do they, respond? I don't want to say react, but how do they respond or work through bear markets, bull markets, rebalancing, tax loss harvesting, perhaps? That's kind of the nitty gritty of what an investment advisor is doing for you on a daily basis regarding your account. Like, how do they handle, who do you call in their office to handle withdrawals? Like the really technical ticky-tack customer service stuff is very important. And I think that's something that most people can probably just tease out on instinct on their own. If you get the vibe that someone's office is not responsive, or someone on support staff is not friendly or competent, or it takes forever to get an appointment with your advisor or something like that, those are things to consider too, that if they're doing that on its face to you, like they're kind of presenting that behavior, what are they doing underneath the surface? So thing to consider. And probably the last, but no less meaningful than the ones before, is one I'd group together is, how is your advisor being paid as a result of you joining on? And what sorts of conflicts of interest do they have? And I group those together because it sounds almost a little asinine, but we as IARs, investment advisor representatives, we have a conflict that we have to disclose in our ADV, our annual filing, and that is that our only source of compensation is client fees. So it sounds kind of obvious that we have a conflict because you, the client, are paying us, but we are. I mean, as business operators, as the business owner, you have a conflict to keep business in the door.
Right.
As a fiduciary, that is a conflict of interest because you're supposed to look out for the person in their best interest, and we do. So that's why we have to disclose that as a conflict of interest to begin with.
Real quick on that, I think about that sometimes when someone says to me, I want to pay cash for this car, or I want to make a big charitable donation, or I want to make a big gift to my children.
Yep.
In a way, this little thing pops into my head saying, well, if they're taking money out of the account, we're not getting paid on that because that's a withdrawal.
Yeah.
But what supersedes that is a fiduciary, and these clients have become friends. Like, we have family that are clients. We build friendships with people. They trust us. And it immediately takes over. What's the right thing that they should do? And it might not be to take a big chunk of money out to put down on a car, or it might be to do so because the interest rates punitive.
Yep.
So it quickly becomes, and you said this earlier, when you trust someone, you know that they're going to do the right thing for you. It's like, are they going to do the right thing when I'm not watching them?
Yep. And that trust thing is, should go without saying. It is obviously so, but you're giving your financial advisor, your life savings to manage for the rest of your life. So it should be someone that you trust. And that, again, is, I think, something that, you, dear listener, are going to be able to tease out on your own. If you're sitting across the table from someone who you get a bad vibe from, who am I to tell you that, that your gut's wrong?
And to add to that, just the juxtaposition of trustworthiness. I remember over 30 years ago when I was a junior analyst and we had to fax our paper trades through to the brokerage firm. So I worked in the investment part, and there were brokers that were in the same company. This was before like the fiduciary standard got much more tightened up.
Yeah.
And I'd wait till the fax machine for incoming faxes would stop so I could send the outgoing trades in. And I'd be standing there and paper would be spitting out from all these mutual fund companies offering these incentives to the brokers. If you put $100,000 in this fund by the end of the month, we will provide you and your spouse with a paid cruise, to the Bahamas and a hotel stay. And I just remember thinking, that's such a horrible, because that was never told to the client. That's obviously illegal now.
It's illegal now. Yeah.
But back then, I mean, there's so many conflicts to your point of how people are paid and what their incentives are.
Yep. Yeah. They are not offering cruises anymore, but there are. I wrote a paper about this in law school. Mutual funds still are able to offer, and we don't have to get into it, but 12B1 fees to brokers who sell clients into those funds, which is essentially like a kickback or a commission to those brokers for selling the fund.
Absolutely.
So, that's something to ask. Like, we at Bishop and Company we're not paid any other way besides client fees. But that's something to ask and other advisors, how are you compensated beyond fees?
Right.
Is there any other way? And, it may be something like that.
Yep.
Bishop and Company chose the fiduciary model because it puts us on the same side of the table as our clients. When they succeed, we succeed. When they face challenges, we suffer right beside them. A true fiduciary focuses on keeping you aligned with your long-term plan and committed to helping you reach your goals, not selling you products. Just as you want an advisor you can trust and enjoy working with, a good fiduciary will also be intentional about choosing clients they can build strong relationships with. Over time, those professional partnerships often grow into lasting friendships. Thanks again for tuning into the Fiduciary's Edge. We're on a mission to teach people how to avoid herd mentality by focusing on the decades rather than days. If you want to learn more, watch out for our quarterly newsletter and podcast. And as always, all views and opinions expressed in this podcast should not constitute financial or legal advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results.